In the chaos of medieval warfare, running out of arrows was more than just an inconvenience. For many soldiers, it marked the turning point between holding the line and fighting for survival. Archers could unleash hundreds of arrows within minutes, but once their quivers emptied, the rhythm of battle changed completely. Supplies were slow, wagons got stuck, and runners carrying spare arrows were often cut down before they reached the front. When that happened, soldiers had to adapt fast. They gathered arrows from the ground, reused what they could, and when nothing was left, they switched to swords, axes, or daggers. Some even reshaped broken arrows, or used wood from nearby trees to craft crude replacements. Running out of arrows tested not just skill, but creativity and discipline. Those moments revealed how flexible medieval armies really were, and how survival often depended on quick thinking, not just good aim. Number 1. Logistics and the reality of arrow supply. In medieval warfare, running out of arrows happened more often than people think. The supply system was slow, manual, and exposed to risk from the first day of a campaign. Every arrow took time to make because each part was crafted by hand. Shafts were usually from ash, poplar, or birch. Fletchers fixed goose or swan feathers to stabilize flight. Blacksmiths forged iron heads and sized them to fit standard shafts. Turning out thousands required weeks, storage space, and careful packing in barrels to keep them dry. Even well-prepared armies still faced gaps because transport was the weak link. An archer might start a battle with 60 to 120 arrows. At sustained rates of fire, that stock could vanish in 10 to 15 minutes. Once lines closed and noise rose, no one could easily push wagons through churned mud or crowded lanes. Horses tired. Drivers hesitated under threat of cavalry raids. Roads broke down after rain and constant traffic. Commanders tried to pace volleys and hold back reserves, yet plans collapsed when pressure spiked. When quivers emptied, archers adjusted on the spot. Some moved back behind heavier troops. Others shifted position to buy time. The reality was simple. Ammunition defined options, and logistics set the limits. Number 2, battlefield recovery and reuse. When arrows ran low, the fastest fix was to pull shots from the ground and put them back into circulation. Soldiers and camp followers watched where volleys landed and rushed in during lulls to grab anything straight enough to fly again. They yanked shafts from soft soil, from wooden shields, and from padded jacks where heads had not bitten too deep. Archers kept small knives to cut fletchings clear and to pry out stubborn arrowheads. Some carried simple wooden or iron pullers that clamped the shaft and gave better leverage. Recovery teams worked in pairs, so one person watched for sudden charges while the other gathered. On open fields, the safest zones were just behind friendly stakes or among pavises, where infantry screened collectors for a few moments. In rain and churned mud, many shafts bent, so archers triaged on the spot. Straight arrows went back in the quiver. Slight bends were warmed near a brazier, or by a shielded ember, and gently worked straight by hand. Badly split wood was stripped for usable heads and ferules. Fletchers traveling with the baggage laid out quick repair stations with spare feathers, sinew, glue, and pitch. They refletched in simple 3-feather patterns that were good enough for short range. Defenders in sieges organized recovery even more tightly. Boys, pages, and laborers swept the base of walls after each assault and tipped baskets of captured arrows into barrels kept under cover. Wet arrows were dried slowly to avoid warping. Heads that stuck in gate timbers or hoardings were twisted free with tongs and set aside for reshafting. Crossbow bolts were also recycled, since their stout heads often survived impacts. Soldiers grabbed quivers from the fallen and redistributed them along the line. Commanders posted runners to shuttle bundles forward and to rotate tired archers out for a few minutes of repair. Nothing was wasted, because every repaired shot meant another chance to disrupt a charge, protect a withdrawal, or buy time until heavier troops could decide the fight. Number 3. Transition to close combat weapons. When recovery stopped working and no new arrows arrived, archers shifted roles and fought as regular infantry. This was not a surprise on the field. Most armies expected it and trained for it during musters. Longbowmen and crossbowmen carried sidearms that were practical in camp and effective in a crush. Short swords and falchions handled brush, rope, and stakes before the battle, then served in the melee when the line closed. Many archers wore a dagger on the right hip and a small knife for utility work on the belt. The dagger was narrow enough to reach the weak points in armor if an opponent was off balance. Some units also issued compact axes or hammers that drove in ground stakes and later struck at helmets, elbows, and knees. When the enemy came near, archers usually fell back through gaps to form behind men at arms. If there was no time to move, they braced near the stakes and fought in a tight knot. A few used the bow as a staff in close quarters. A tough wooden limb could shove, trip, or strike in a short arc. Crossbowmen often had pavises nearby, so they crouched behind them and drew swords as the shield wall closed. On the English and Burgundian side, bills and glaives were common on the second rank. Archers who reached that line grabbed spare polearms or took one from a fallen comrade. Polearms let them keep distance and aim for joints without wrestling. Training stressed steady feet, short blows, and teamwork with the man on either side. Veterans watched for slips in footing, and for the moment, a visor lifted to breathe. In mud or on broken ground, they pushed rather than chased. They kept formation, used shields or bodies as cover, and avoided getting isolated. Adaptability mattered more than heroics. A unit that could change pace, change weapon, and keep its shape under stress often decided the fight once the arrows were gone. Number 4. Adaptation and improvisation. When arrows started to run short, smart commanders changed the pace before the line collapsed. They told archers to hold fire and pick targets that mattered most, like officers, banner carriers, or horses that pulled heavy troops forward. Rates of fire slowed from steady volleys to brief, coordinated bursts. This kept pressure on the enemy while buying time for runners to search the ground and bring back anything usable. Units also rotated shooters, so one rank could recover arrows while another stayed ready. If resupply failed, the focus shifted to field repairs. Baggage trains often carried small kits with spare feathers, thread, glue, pitch, and a few tools. Fletchers worked undercover and straightened bent shafts with gentle heat, then refletched in a simple 3-feather pattern that was good at short distances. Soldiers stripped heads from broken shafts and kept a pile for quick reshafting. In wooded terrain, men cut emergency shafts from straight saplings or split billets, shaved them with knives, and bound the head with a wrap of thread and pitch. Accuracy dropped at range, but these arrows still punched at close quarters. Crossbow crews did similar work with quarrels. They saved stout heads and ferrules, reused the best bolts, and marked the rest for repair during the next lull. On defense, pavises and stakes created pockets where crews could fix gear without taking constant fire. Some armies planned for shortages in their formations. Archers opened lanes so they could fall back through billmen or spearmen once quivers were light. Others worked in mixed files where a polearm stood ready behind every few archers. In sieges, workshops near the gate kept small forges running, turning scrap into new heads by night and tying them to fresh shafts by morning. None of this was elegant. It was practical. The goal was to keep a trickle of missiles in the air, protect the front while lines shifted, and stretch limited stores long enough for the heavy troops to finish the job. Number 5. Tactical and psychological consequences. When arrows stopped flying, the shape of the fight changed almost at once. The noise dropped, the sky cleared, and both sides felt that the next phase would be decided at close range. Commanders understood this risk and tried to cushion the moment when quivers ran empty. They placed archers behind stakes, trenches, wagons, or pavises, so a withdrawal could happen in some order. They kept small reserves with fresh bundles and used runners to rotate men rather than abandon a whole wing. Even with these measures, the loss of missile pressure was felt across the line. Volleys did more than cause wounds. They disrupted formations, hid movement, and made horses and men hesitate. When that pressure ended, heavy infantry and cavalry pushed forward with more confidence. Archers who had been anchoring a flank now had to fall back through gaps or form knots around billmen and men-at-arms. This transition demanded discipline. If timing slipped, units bunched up, and lanes clogged at the worst moment. Battles like Negera and Verneuil show how fast control could break when tired missile troops were drawn into a melee they did not plan to fight. Fatigue built after long firing, and men who had been steady at range could lose cohesion in the crush. Good leaders reduced that risk by mixing missile troops with polearms in depth, by marking clear fallback routes, and by signaling when to switch from harassment to holding. They also planned for morale. An empty quiver could feel like failure to a young archer. Officers countered that feeling with clear roles after the switch: hold the stake line, guard the banner, protect the baggage. In the longer view, these episodes pushed states to invest in storage, transport, and standard parts. Central magazines produced uniform heads and bundled shafts in barrels that could be counted and moved quickly. Better planning did not remove the shock of losing arrow power, but it shortened the gap between the ranged phase and the moment when the heavy troops took over, and that often kept an army from unraveling when the sky went quiet.